On this day, 353,424 children will be born. Is this day particularly special? No, it's just like any other day. Every year, 129 million children are born. In the 15 minutes that I will spend here with you setting the stage, there will be 3,600 children born. 129 million children born every year. Where are they being born? They're being born mostly in Asia and Africa. Oh, if this bottle could talk. This bottle has been witness to so much history over the past 2 centuries. This bottle has been a witness to the Industrial Revolution. This bottle has been witness to Winston Churchill's wartime conversations. This bottle was on the table as Iraqi Ba'ath Party officials in the Saddam Hussein era were debating their next moves on repressing their own people or handling the US military. So in so many ways, the bottle itself, if it could talk, it would tell us an extraordinary history of the past 2 centuries. What we've witnessed over the past 25 to 30 years is a geo-economic transformation of our world, in which we've seen the emerging markets, the so-called emerging markets, we might call them the re-emerging markets, but the emerging markets, which accounted for less than a quarter of GDP about 30 years ago, now account for more than half of global GDP, which is why we're on the cusp of the 4th Industrial Revolution that is transforming our world. But we all know Gordon Moore's law, but how many of you know Mike Tyson's law? Mike Tyson, of course, being the great American boxer and philosopher. Mike Tyson, who said everyone has a plan, that is, until you get punched in the face. New Year's Eve of 2019, going into 2020, you might remember where you were. You were celebrating, well, right around that time, a seafood market in Wuhan, China, had developed some interest among Chinese authorities because they noticed a lot of people who had been at that market were developing strange symptoms and they couldn't breathe. And they began tracking it. And then China really got hit hard over the next couple of months, but it didn't really start to hit many of us in the Western world until about 30 or 45 days later. But one of the things it has been a massive punch. Now, is it a knockout punch? Now, I'm going to go through some of these slides, and it's going to feel like a knockout punch. So you may want to get your Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope ready because there's no mistaking what we're facing. We are facing a great deal of carnage. I am going to, towards the end of this talk and perhaps in the Q&A afterwards, talk a little bit more optimistically about our future, because I do see this extraordinary human resilience. I do see extraordinary innovation that's happening, and the literally hundreds of companies chasing a global vaccine. I'm confident we're going to get there. But brace yourself for some of the punches. As Johnny Walker began to rise, in many ways it mimicked the rise of Europe. Johnny Walker rode the wave of the Industrial Revolution. Johnny Walker also rode the wave of the British Empire. It was always 5 o'clock somewhere. Who could have imagined the rise of the smartphone? I mean, we all have these smartphones in our pockets, which has the same computing capacity that NASA had to send a man to the moon. The same computing capacity, and it's in our pockets. And it's in pockets in India and Egypt. 2/3 of all air travel will be in the emerging markets, mostly in Asia. There has been an air travel revolution in Asia over the past 15 years. This is why you're seeing companies like Starbucks and Unilever and Nestle and Uber and other major corporations chasing the Asian middle class, chasing this new global middle class. In fact, I would argue it's the great commercial prize of the 21st century. The reality is cities are the economic engines of these countries. So, for example, an emerging markets investor, you might ask him or her what they think of Indonesia.
And I asked an emerging markets investor this very question, and his response was, I don't know about Indonesia, but I sure do like Jakarta. And the idea there is Jakarta accounts for 25% of Indonesia's GDP. In a case like South Korea, Seoul accounts for 50%. Almost 50% of South Korea's GDP, and all across the emerging world and even in the advanced economies, it's cities that are the economic engines driving country GDP growth, right? Let's just go back to December 17, 2010. Mohamed Bouazizi, a vegetable vendor in Tunisia, gets his permit taken away, goes to the municipality, asks for it back, ends up pouring gasoline on himself and lighting himself on fire. Why did he do that? The lack of opportunities. What did he say before he lit himself on fire? He said, how am I supposed to make a living? All across the Middle East and North Africa region, those problems still exist, and they have been exacerbated over the past 5 years. The how am I supposed to make a living question remains. The under 30s across the Middle East, North Africa region are 60% of the population, and they're still asking, how am I supposed to make a living? So the next president, in line with leaders from Asia, I think the strategic plan for the Middle East, North Africa region must involve an economic development plan led by the private sector, because they're going to need to answer this, how am I supposed to make a living question.
Joining me, Afshin Molavi. He's co-director of the Washington-based Emerge 85 lab, which looks at global trends, urbanization, and growing middle classes. Afshin, welcome. Growing middle classes, I suppose, is the key word to this, with China now something like 1/10 of the population traveling.
It is, absolutely. I mean, what we've seen in China with the rise of the middle class, this is one of the most extraordinary geo-economic rises in global history. China in the early 1980s had about 80% of its population living in extreme poverty. 80%. Today, there's less than 10%. The travel industry accounts for about 10% of global GDP. So this is a big global economy story, not just a light travel story. So this is certainly a challenge. Governments are going to have to deal with it. But let's hope we don't limit travel, because travel, the great Moroccan Arab traveler Ibn Battuta, he once said that travel, it leaves you speechless and then it makes you into a storyteller, right? We want people to travel. We want people to experience other cultures. It's the greatest way to shatter national stereotypes, and I think that's really important.
Actually, we're talking about new norms. I mean, the challenges of this, though, are extraordinary.
I'd like to point out, however, that President Xi Jinping did not invent the new Silk Road, right? So over the past 20 to 25 years, as we've seen with the rise of emerging markets, we've seen with rapid urbanization across the emerging world, increasing technological connectivity and physical connectivity, and growing middle classes, we've actually seen much more trade, organic, among emerging market multinationals. If you're in Africa today, you can't miss Indian companies. You can't miss the Emirates airline network, for example, in Africa. All across Southeast Asia, you're seeing companies in Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand, crossing borders and investing and trading. The key moment of alchemy is when Johnny Walker fused its brand with aspiration. Because there is nothing more human than aspiring to a better life, to walking forward, to leaning forward. You were not drinking a glass of whiskey, you were drinking a glass of aspiration.